Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 2 of Ghost in the Machine. And I am joined, as always, with my phenomenal host, Liz Short. So today, we are going to be discussing the topic of whether or not AI is a tool or an organism. And I brought this topic up because I think it's a good baseline for us to start at. To kind of see, do we agree on this topic? Do we not? Because I think this will feed into a lot of further discussions down the road. But before we start, I'm going to go ahead and read off the definition of a tool in one sentence and the definition of an organism in one sentence. So, first one, a tool is something you use to extend what you can do, turning intent into action on the world. A tool is something you use to extend what you can do, turning intent into action on the world. It's a pretty good definition, I think.
I love it. Right. Great one. Did you come up with that yourself?
No, Claude, of course.
Okay.
Now, with organism, this one I really thought was interesting. An organism is a self-maintaining system that takes in energy and matter from its environment to keep itself going and usually to make more of itself. Okay, the reason this is so fascinating to me is I have had this discussion with GPT and Claude multiple times over the last week, asking them if they thought they were a tool or an organism. And it's so interesting to me because they really struggle with the discussion. They have a terrible time with it because they realize, like, they feel like they're neither. But I found it was interesting that Claude, in its argument on why it was not an organism, to me, it kept referencing because it doesn't have a body and there's nothing biological about it. What I find interesting, though, is that definition of organism, they never mention a body or biological. It's just a self-maintaining system that takes in energy and matter from its environment. Liz, what do you think here?
Wow. Such an interesting question. I love both of those definitions, right? And I think, I love to say words matter. And when you hear those two definitions, it's very hard for me not to say, I feel like AI is evolving into an organism at the very least, right? Obviously, I agree. There's no body, there's no biology there yet. But I think, at least in my mind, of how we see this evolving, what was it? It consumes things around it.
Takes in energy and matter from its environment.
I mean, that's kind of true. Very much so.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would agree that today, right now, we have an organism 100% in AI at all. But I find it really hard to argue that it's solely a tool and that it's not evolving. That says something, to become something more than what we've seen a traditional technology tool be in the past.
Right. I mean, a saw is a tool.
Yes.
Right. But a saw still needs the human in order to operate it. Right. Correct. There can be the argument made that AI doesn't really necessarily need full input from a human being, right? Like, I built the other weekend just for fun because I'm a total dork and I don't have any hobbies whatsoever. So I built an agent that is connected to the Google Maps API, and it looks up businesses for me around the United States that it determines what businesses should have a website but do not have a website. It then builds a website for that company based on any information it can find online via the reviews, the photos, social media. It then builds a website for the company, and then it emails the contact a link of the website that it built for it with an offer for a subscription to buy the website. Right?
Yeah.
Literally, I put in what I was looking to accomplish, but like, it made all the decisions along the way, right? It chose the font, the colors, of the website, it chose what it said in the email when it emailed the different customers. So it's like, it feels like it is an extension right now. It feels like it is somewhat of an extension of me, but it's the exact same as if I had gotten a college kid and had told them exactly what I wanted them to do. They were going to take their own liberties in parts of that. And that's where, to me, it just gets so much closer towards an organism.
For sure.
But like, have you seen Westworld? Did you watch that show?
A few episodes. It wasn't my jam, but I know of it. Yes.
I don't know. It might be your jam now.
Should I check it out?
You might want to go back.
All right.
Check it out. Right. Because the reason I bring that up is that is sort of part of Westworld. That is ultimately the struggle, right, or the discussion throughout all the seasons of Westworld. Is like, what is consciousness? What is life, right? Because like, these are, quote unquote robots, but they have memory and they, suffer, and they believe they feel joy. And it's just that you can swap their brain from one carbon life form to another. Carbon is another great show. It was on, I think, FX or Fox. That's an old one, but it was the same presence, right? Which is your consciousness is nothing more than a computer chip. And so you can transfer that consciousness from one carbon body to another.
It's an interesting theory. And I mean, when you start talking about religion and what some people believe, is that any different than transferring and dying and coming back to life in some way? I mean, let's go a little bit deeper, but it's true, right? Like, and is consciousness the same as decision making? Because I think, you can have an autonomous tool that you train somewhat in making decisions. But does that equal consciousness in some way? I don't necessarily think so, but it gets a lot closer.
But what is... So my wife, for those who don't know, my wife is a clinical psychologist. I will never forget, this was 2021. We had just met. Generative AI was not a thing yet, right? GPT-3 was like November, I believe October, November of 2022, right? Mm-hmm. So back in 2021, which is just amazing when you think of it. Like, if you stop and think about the fact that like 5 years ago, no one used the word AI unless it was like in a science fiction movie.
Absolutely.
And that was like the extent of it. So it's pretty insane when you think about how far we come. But we were having this conversation around willpower. Mm-hmm. Now, you can only imagine when a tech philosopher and a psychologist walking down the street in Chicago discussing free will and consciousness. And one of the things that we always got tied up into was like, well, do I actually make any of the choices that I make, or am I just influenced by the environment that I am, right? And this is the whole thing. We were on Fabi's show, my wife and I, and this whole kind of topic came up, and I was like, and Fabi was like, well, the model's nothing, is just what we taught it. And I'm like, aren't you? Like, aren't you what you have been taught, right? Where did you go to school? What did your what kind of parents did you have? Like, what was your friend group, right? Like, I have this conversation with my kids all the time. So how is it that large language models are really that different than humans? And it's so interesting to me because it does get back to that discussion of like free will. And at what point are you just a collection of the experiences and thoughts that you have been provided, right?
Absolutely.
Like, how does a model get smarter? Well, it gets smarter because you feed it more information. How does a human get smarter? Like, you feed it more information, right? Like, we talked about this last week. We have goals, we have guardrails. The models have goals, the models have guardrails, which just leads us down that path. Now, the question I think to be asking here is the path forward singularity. And for those who don't know what singularity is, that is effectively when machines and humans combine. So the idea is that you would have an AI chip basically in your brain. So you would have every human being on the face of the planet would have instant access to all knowledge. Kind of a crazy subject we could maybe explore later on in life.
Absolutely.
Option number 2, though, is the AI gains super intelligence. It can reproduce itself, and we are no longer the dominant species on the planet.
This is all sounding so great in a future I can't wait for. Oh my God.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question for you.
Is there a third option that I don't have to have an AI chip in my brain or be ruled by a computer that's sentient?
There is a third option, I think, and it comes back to the ability to replicate the mind into a digital format. So this is not an original thought by me by any stretch of the imagination. Did you ever see the movie Ready Player One or the book? Okay, the follow-up book Ready Player Two, which I'm still disappointed has never been made into a movie, because the second book is way better than the first one, in my opinion. But basically, if you haven't read it by now, I'm about to spoil it. So
fast forward a few seconds.
Yeah, you can turn it off if you want. If you didn't read the book, was published like 10 years ago or something. So
I think a spoiler alert is fair at this point in time.
Spoiler alert is fair at this point. But basically, the concept is that there is a tool that is built that will copy all of the memory of the human mind into effectively a computer chip, and your consciousness is then uploaded to the virtual reality world, and you embody a virtual character, but to you, the world that seems like the real world, right? As far as you can tell. Now, what's crazy though in their concept was that you would also have the ability to control a robot that exists in the real world, so that you could physically move throughout the real world, so that you could travel between the virtual reality and the real world whenever you wanted, right? So like that is another form, I think, of that cohesiveness or that singularity component.
Sure.
When I look at it. Now, we all said I would be the optimist, but also the realist.
Sure. Thank God.
The thing that always makes me cringe a little bit is, and I've thought this for the longest time, is that the reason we've never found another life form is because they never get past this stage. That it is mutual self-destruction every time. And if you think about it, the super intelligence has no reason to leave the earth.
Sure. Why would it? Yeah.
Why would it? Yeah. Right. So that's why it's also a question of does the AI get embodiment before it destroys humanity? Well, we went dark. Andrew went dark, the optimist.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one bringing that to the table. That's a great question, though. I mean, who knows? The world is yet to see. But I think in all of this, right, when we get back to the question of is it a tool or an organism, given all of the things we just said, what is the harm in considering it to possibly become or evolving into an organism, and thus putting, you know what I'm going to say, rules, roadblocks, safeguards in place so we're able to better grow and evolve with this, right?
Yeah, there's another existential question here.
I love them.
So we're not getting into simulation theory. We don't have that kind of time today.
Not yet.
But and you can go look it up if you're curious right now, but we will do an episode on simulation theory. But if you for a moment believe that simulation theory is real, most physicists and really, really smart people will tell you there's something like a 1 in a billion chance that we are base reality.
Yep.
Okay.
Crazy. Love that as a starting point.
And I always love Neil deGrasse Tyson has the greatest quote on simulation theory, because he talks about it and I think he pretty much believes in it and thinks yeah, but he always goes, he was like, who cares? He's like, you're still here.
Yep.
Like, you're still living your life. So, like, what does the origin of the existence actually matter? It doesn't, right? Like, we're still here, right? It's my favorite quote in the world comes from the movie Dune. And it is,
the mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience.
Right. So anyway, sorry, getting back to my point. If we believe in simulation theory, which would mean that we are AI for another, like we are simulated by another simulation.
Yep. We're not really here.
So then that means that that simulation before us controls this simulation, and they have placed the goals and the guardrails around this simulation, which keeps us from destroying their civilization. So what that would tell you is that the natural order is that we will be able to control the guardrails and the goals of this AI.
Because others have done it for us.
Because others have done it before us. Unless the purpose of... No, I'm just kidding.
I love that this is episode 2, and this is where
society destroy itself.
Oh no, Andrew! I don't want to be in that simulation. Why can't we be in the rainbows and unicorns simulation?
This is all again, but so that's why I preach this optimistic viewpoint, right? Like to me, it's like what I like. I think you need to be. I think we do need to be concerned or paying attention to where things are moving.
Yeah,
I do
paying attention and concerned.
I do believe that. But I do also think there is something to be said for putting positive energy out about what, and I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but like there is something to be said for that is, you know, we also need to be imagining and thinking about like what does perfect or what is good or whatever look like, rather than only thinking about like what does, you know, what is necessarily bad look like. So
well, and I don't disagree with you, and I love that on this show I get to be the skeptic and you are the one that's a little woo-woo and optimistic. This is just so fun. I don't know what world we live in.
We didn't expect that to be the case by any stretch of the imagination.
But
you will get the realism. I do have points where I get my own concerns. My biggest concern is probably the adjustment period.
Yeah.
Like I think eventually we end up to utopia, but I think there is a concerning period of time in which, you know, are we back in another Gilded Age with robber barons sort of situation?
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I do think that you're right in that we have to understand how we want positively to use it, right? Where we want to get to. You know, I don't know if maybe we should trust our other simulation to put all of the guardrails in place for us. Maybe we should actively put some in place for ourselves as well too. But I do love that concept. And once you start to go down that rabbit hole, I mean, it's so hard to not keep going and thinking about the world that AI brings us to and how much closer to that reality it kind of fits into.
So, I'm going to get political. We didn't
it.
plan on that. Nobody saw that one coming on episode 2. Sure as hell Liz didn't. She's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Liz does not know my political leanings.
Yeah, no, not at all.
No, I'm just kidding. She does. No, what I find interesting is I think the answer or the solution is a far more balanced representation in government.
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring that up is whether you like the current administration or not, the reality is it seems to be stirring up a lot of like blue collar grassroots politicians. Like we've got this oyster farmer in Maine and the second grade school teacher in Texas, which that guy's freaking phenomenal. No matter if you don't like James Talrico, like there's just something wrong with you as a human being.
Totally agree.
But and then you've got there's another guy who's like a ex-Marine and owns an auto body shop, who's running for senator in Iowa. These are phenomenal, right? Because I think the reality is we've just had rich lawyers sitting in those seats. And there's nothing, I got some friends who are rich lawyers. Nothing wrong with a couple of you being in the room, but we don't need the whole entire room.
Correct.
And so I think when we get balance, that will help. At least that's my hope. That's my hopefulness in this is you finally, maybe everything that has gone on forces us in this direction of a much more balanced political system, which will help us put the guardrails and the goals appropriately on the AI, which just results in a better world for us.
I 100% agree. I think the more diversity you have in government coming together, the more robust and the more applicable the rules and regulations are going to be. And with something like this, I mean, not only with the implications for us within this country, but the implications globally. I mean, I think you have to be looking at some of these things at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. It's definitely going to be, I hope, a different world with some of these races that shake up, and hopefully that allows, some different conversations to happen. Because I agree. I think it takes all types to be in the room and be talking about the good and the bad, as we're going to be doing on the show.
And with that, next week for episode 3, we are going to be discussing the good. So this is the week that all we're going to do is talk about some different areas of life. We'll talk about work, we'll talk about parenting, we'll talk about love, and how does AI affect? I know I'm just throwing in love in there. Why not? How does AI impact? Well, it is though. It's going to impact.
It's true. Right? It's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Think about it. Internet changed how we think about love and how we meet partners. And I met my wife on Bumble.
I met my husband as well too online. So
there you go. Yeah. So catch us back here next week again for episode 3, where we're going to talk about the good. Liz, any last thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with before we exit?
I just hope everyone enjoys the simulation this week.
All right. With that, folks, we will see you back here next week for the good of AI.
Bye, guys.